community's current assessment is that these three objects were most likely balloons tied to private companies, recreation or research institutions studying weather or conducting other scientific research. And I expect to be speaking with President Xi, and I hope we're going to get to the bottom of this. But I make no apologies for taking down that balloon.
This is my first video update coming to you from Athens, Greece on this Friday morning. Let's talk about Joe Bidenopoulos, Greece, his favorite son, and balloons. I said I wasn't going to talk about balloons, but I have to talk about balloons because Biden gave a press conference connected to the shooting down of balloons. And Biden pretty much admitted that the U.S. military, they have no idea what these balloons were about. They don't know who sent them up in the air. They don't know what they were being used for. But, you know, they spent millions and millions of dollars in U.S. weaponry to shoot down these balloons. And I think that Biden admitted that they haven't even collected these balloons, didn't he? They haven't even recovered most of these balloons. So they're just sitting there, these balloons that they shot down. He said they could be corporate balloons or weather balloons or spy balloons or party balloons. He has no idea. But Biden wanted everyone to know that he will in no way apologize to China or Xi Jinping for shooting down the Chinese balloon. That he wants everybody to know. He's not going to apologize because Biden, that's just the way he rolls. Biden, you know, he's a tough guy. He's old school, and he doesn't apologize for making tough, strong decisions when it comes to shooting down balloons. And yeah, that was the press conference yesterday from Biden and the balloon story, Balloon Gate. But Biden, he's shooting down balloons. He's blowing up pipelines. The guy is an absolute wrecking ball. And Seymour Hersh, since we're talking about pipelines, blowing up pipelines and Joe Biden, Seymour Hersh gave an interview to Democracy Now! And he once again said that he has more things to write connected to Nord Stream and I believe the conflict in Ukraine. I think he's going to broaden things out and write about the failed Ukraine project from the Biden White House, but he's definitely going to write some more things about Nord Stream. He also said that the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline was one of the dumbest things. That's what he said, one of the dumbest things that an American government has done in years. His exact quote was, "I think that this has probably been, in the view of some of the people who did it, one of the dumbest things the American government has done in years, and we've had 4 years of Trump." Hersh once again talked about how the Biden White House was worried that the Olaf Scholz government would backslide on supporting Project Ukraine. Once word got out that Project Ukraine was going really, really bad for the Zelensky regime and for the Biden White House. And so Biden, in order to prevent Olaf Scholz from backsliding in his support for Project Ukraine, decided to blow up the pipeline. And Hersh once again stated that the benefits that the Biden White House saw in blowing up the pipeline, outside of keeping Germany in line with its support for Project Ukraine, was that the U.S. was going to get the economic benefits of being the only energy game in town. Well, the United States and Norway. And so in the interview that Hersh gave a couple of days ago to Berliner Zeitung, he mentioned that there were 8 explosives that were meant to detonate, but only 6 actually worked. And so that means that there are two explosives that some country has, some military has in its possession. I doubt that those explosives were left at the bottom of the sea. And I would imagine that the U.S. military, perhaps the countries that started the initial investigation when this first happened, Germany, Sweden, and I think Denmark, either Denmark or was it Norway, the three countries that had an investigation, opened up an investigation when the pipeline was first blown up, and then they kind of forgot about it. They ended the investigation. Maybe one of these countries has these two explosives, because whoever has these explosives, you would be able to study the explosives, and I imagine you could probably trace who put those explosives in the Baltic. So someone has these two undetonated explosives, and I thought that was a bit of interesting news that Seymour Hersh said in his interview the other day to Berliner Zeitung. But the Nord Stream sabotage seems to have been very liberating for one of the people who Seymour Hersh claims was part of this group behind the plot to blow up Nord Stream, and that is one Victoria Nuland, because she gave an interview to the Carnegie Endowment, NGO or fund or whatever it is, Carnegie Endowment. And it's on YouTube, actually, this interview. And she was very, very open, very liberated, it seems, about the U.S.'s intention with regards to the conflict in Ukraine and regime change in Russia and all of these things. I mean, this was a pretty incredible interview that she gave. I've never seen Victoria Nuland so open and honest about her plans and the U.S.'s plans for the balkanization of Russia, the overthrow of Putin, and the conflict in Ukraine. And she kind of contradicted the statements that Blinken said the other day, according to Politico, which is that the U.S. is going to help Ukraine beat back Russia and take over Lugansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporozhye. But according to Blinken, Crimea is going to be the red line. That's when they're going to tell the Ukraine military to put a break on it when the Ukraine military launches their big spring offensive. But Victoria Nuland, in this interview, she basically said that not only is the U.S. government going to help Ukraine take Crimea, but the U.S. government then is going to work on getting the regime change in Russia, because according to Nuland, Ukraine will never be safe. There will never be security in Ukraine or in all of Europe until you get regime change in Russia, the removal of Putin. Let me read you some of her quotes. Unless the Crimean Peninsula is at the very least demilitarized, Ukraine won't feel safe, while the ideal end to the conflict is with a revolution in Moscow, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland said on Thursday. Ukrainians have to get to a map that is more sustainable for them, Nuland said in a video interview with the Washington think tank Carnegie Endowment. They have significant chunks of territory they need to be a viable state before you even get to the question of Crimea, and that's what they're focused on now. The U.S. position is that Ukraine is owed and due all of their territory within their international borders, which means Crimea as well, Nuland said. Ukraine is not going to be safe unless Crimea is at a minimum, demilitarized, Nuland insisted on Thursday, claiming that Moscow had turned the peninsula into a military base with command posts, logistics depots, and airfields for Iranian drones. Those are legitimate targets. Ukraine is hitting them, and we are supporting that. Asked how she saw the conflict ending, Nuland said, the West must never trust, as long as Vladimir Putin is in power or somebody like him, that this is truly over. Even if the fighting ends on Ukrainian terms, there has to be a long-term plan to build up Ukraine's military as a deterrent She also expressed a preference for Russians overthrowing their government for a better future offered by the West. Pretty stunning statements from Victoria Nuland. I have to say that I believe, this is just my opinion, but I believe that Victoria Nuland, there's a part of her that is very happy that the truth about the Nord Stream sabotage is coming out there, is now coming out in the open. If you believe what Cy Hirsch is reporting, Victoria Nuland is liberated. She is now able to say exactly what the objectives and the long-term plan is for Ukraine, but more importantly, for Russia, because this is all about Russia. It's about regime change in Russia, and she's openly saying it now. It's about regime change in Russia. It's about removing Putin. It's about neutralizing Russia. And as she said in her interview to the Carnegie Endowment think tank, it is about making sure that Russia is under the control of the West. That is what she is now openly admitting. She's happy that the truth is coming out there, because now she can speak freely and openly about what's going on. And she understands that there is not one damn thing that Germany or Europe can do about it or will do about it. Keep in mind, this is F the EU, Victoria Nuland. So some very, very interesting, quite shocking statements coming from Victoria Nuland, and it contradicts a bit of what Politico was reporting about in connection to the comments that Blinken made, which to me indicates that it is indeed Victoria Nuland that is making the decisions in the State Department and not Anthony Blinken. So when Anthony Blinken says Crimea is off the table, Victoria Nuland comes out the next day and says, no, it's not. Our goal is absolutely Crimea. It's to demilitarize Crimea, take over Crimea, and then move on towards Russia. Now, I don't know how Victoria Nuland is going to pull all of this off, because all of the reports are that battle tanks are not going to be sent to Ukraine in the numbers that were initially reported. The fighter jet issue is off the table, or it seems that we're not going to get all of these F-16s as well. And long-range missiles have been ruled out by the Biden White House for now, even though you do have members of Congress now trying to push Biden to send F-16s and long-range ATACMS. But the reports are from Bloomberg and the Financial Times that Ukraine is going to receive fewer battle tanks from allies than promised. That is what Bloomberg is reporting on. The Financial Times is saying a year of war in Ukraine has left Europe's armories dry. That is what the Financial Times is saying. They're reporting that the conflict in Ukraine has already devastated European arsenals. In many capitals, defense ministers are being informed that there is practically nothing left in stocks. Warehouses and even dumps are empty. And Bloomberg is saying that the world's war machine is running low on ammunition. So I just don't understand how Ukraine is going to pull off these big goals that Victoria Nuland is laying out. I just don't see it. There are even reports that the U.S. is now looking to send Iranian weapons to the Zelensky regime. That's how desperate they've become. And when I mean Iranian weapons, I'm talking about these weapons that allegedly the U.S. seized Iranian weapons that were heading to Yemen to support the Houthis. And there's talk now that the Biden White House is trying to figure out a way to unlock these confiscated weapons from Iran and to try and find a way to send them to Ukraine. So unless Victoria Nuland knows something that the Financial Times, Bloomberg, defense ministers in Europe don't know, because the reports are that they have no more ammo, no more tanks, are not willing to give F-16s, there is no army to mount this big offensive. I've seen videos. I can't confirm these videos, but there are videos floating around Twitter and Telegram which show that Zelensky is now sending teenage or very young-aged women into battle, into the front lines. I can't confirm this. I've just seen a couple of videos, so it's hard to say if this is accurate or not. But unless Victoria Nuland has some sort of million-man army that has been training on some secret island with thousands of pieces of U.S. weaponry, tanks and fighter jets, I don't see how she is going to pull off this taking over of Crimea and then the revolution and overthrow of Putin. But that was her interview to the Carnegie Endowment. And one thing about the Nord Stream sabotage, which I was thinking about yesterday afternoon, is that the Russian military, was it the military or the foreign ministry? They were talking about how satellites now are fair game in the conflict in Ukraine, taking down satellites that are being used to give information about Russian forces. These are now fair game. Components of civilian infrastructure in space provided to Ukraine for military purposes may become a legitimate target for retaliatory strike, the Russian Foreign Ministry said. So I was thinking about this statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry, and I was thinking about the Nord Stream sabotage. And I said in a couple of videos that the Nord Stream sabotage, unless the UN conducts some sort of investigation and gets to the bottom of this, and we get some sort of trial or tribunal for the people that thought up this idea, they have to face some consequences. I said that this changes everything because it means that all kinds of infrastructure is now fair game, including satellite. I said this a couple of days ago. Now we get this statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry that they may take out satellites. And, why not? If we're blowing up pipelines, why can't Russia or China or India or any country take out satellites that they feel are a threat to whatever they have going on? I mean, everything is fair game now. But I was thinking about this statement and the fact that Lavrov said the other day that Russia is pushing for the UN to investigate, and they're going to get a Security Council meeting on the Nord Stream sabotage, and how the United States, even though Ned Price gave a statement about Nord Stream and said it's utter nonsense, but how the United States, including the collective West, mainstream media, is just ignoring this. They're like, we don't care. We don't care what you say, Seymour Hersh. We don't care what you say, Russia. We don't care what you say, China, because China is also pushing for an investigation into Nord Stream. The U.S. is saying that they don't care. And Victoria Nuland is liberated now with the news about Nord Stream, and she's coming out and saying, you know what? F the EU. We don't care about what everyone thinks about Nord Stream. We're going to do what we want, and the plan for Ukraine and Russia and for Europe is this. And the strategy for Russia, I think, going forward, because the U.S. is not going to, they're not going to recognize any type of UN investigation if the UN does investigate. If Russia goes to an international court, the U.S. doesn't recognize many of these international courts, so nothing's going to happen with the U.S. and Nord Stream. No one is going to be brought for justice or made to face consequences for these stupid decisions. But there is one thing that Russia can do. They can go after Norway, and that's what I think Russia will end up doing. They're going to go after Norway, and I think they're going to go to international courts and go after the Norwegian officials that went along with this Biden plan to blow up Norway. And it's the smart thing to do when you think about it. Let's use another mafia. Let's use another mafia analogy. We've been using a lot of mob mafia analogies, but when the feds go after the mob, They never go after the big guy. They always go after the underlings, and they get the underlings to rat out the mob boss, and that's how you get the mob boss. It's like Goodfellas. They went after who was Ray Liotta's character? They went after Henry Hill, and then they got Henry Hill to rat out Paulie and all the other big mob bosses. That's what I think the strategy from Russia is going to be, because I believe that Norway does recognize all of the international courts, and they are part of all of the international courts, The Hague and the international courts of, I don't even know, human rights or whatever, all of these international courts that the U.S. is not a part of. Norway is a part of these courts, and that is what I think Russia is going to end up doing at the end of the day. They're going to go after Norway. They're going to go after the officials in Norway who decided to go along with this ridiculous plan from the Biden White House, and then they're going to work on Norway ratting out the big guy. That's how I think it is going to work. Anyway, those are some more thoughts connected to the Nord Stream sabotage. What else should we talk about? The Foreign Policy magazine, this neocon magazine, they are talking about the 10th sanctions that are now going to be coming up, the EU's 10th sanctions package. And that's going to be my clown world, by the way, but I'm going to save that for the end of the video. But they're saying that the sanctions are not working. They're actually coming out and admitting that all of these sanctions from Europe, from the United States, have been one complete failure. And they have an article with the title, "What Putin Got Right. The Russian president got many things wrong about invading Ukraine, but not everything." And in this article, they go over all of the things that Putin got right, including understanding that the sanctions were not going to work, understanding that the people in Russia would actually support the Russian government. They said Putin got that right as well. And Putin also got right the fact that most of the countries in the world, 80% of the world, would actually not go along with EU sanctions. So Putin also got that right as well. But Europe is preparing their 10th sanctions package. But one thing that is not going to be on the table for these sanctions is the nuclear energy industry of Russia. Hungary has vetoed that. That is not going to be in this sanctions package. The rubber industry is also not going to be in this sanctions package. And a lot of countries were against sanctioning Russia's rubber industry. And we also have the diamond industry, which, from what I understand, Belgium is putting a red line on sanctioning Russia's diamonds. So that is also something that is not going to be in this sanctions package. Zelensky gave an interview to the BBC or to CNN. I always confuse those two. I guess there's really not much difference between the BBC or CNN. But in this interview, Zelensky, he said that this big Russian offensive has already started, that everyone is talking about. This massive Russian offensive has already begun. He said Russian attacks are already happening from several directions. Ukraine President Zelensky said a predicted Russian spring offensive had already begun. It was an interview with the BBC. It says Ukraine's war. Zelensky rules out territory deal with Putin in BBC interview. So no territory deal, because Zelensky has been assured by Nuland that Ukraine is going to be able to take Crimea in the near future, according to Nuland. So Zelensky is parroting Nuland's talking points. No territory deal, no peace deal. According to Zelensky, this big offensive has already started. And then he said, "Give me some money and give me some weapons. I need 100 billion." That's how Zelensky ended the interview with the BBC. Just kidding. I don't think that's how he ended the interview with the BBC, but I'm sure he asked for money and weapons in this interview with the BBC. But we have the 10th sanctions package coming up, and we also now have The Munich Security Conference taking place as well, I believe from the 17th to the 19th. We have the Munich Security Conference. And it was in this Munich Security Conference last year where Zelensky was running around talking about Ukraine getting nuclear weapons, and this was the final straw for Russia, where they said, okay, this guy's running around Munich talking about getting nuclear weapons, giving interviews to the BBC and talking about Ukraine's right for nukes. And no one at this Munich Security Conference, Kamala Harris was there, Olaf Scholz was there, Ursula von der Leyen was there. No one in attendance is telling Zelensky to shut up. No one is coming out with a statement saying there is no way that the United States or Europe would ever allow Ukraine to get nuclear weapons. The reverse was happening. All of these leaders in Munich were actually egging on Zelensky to come out and say that Ukraine was going to get nuclear weapons. I wonder why they were egging Zelensky on to talk about Ukraine getting nukes. I wonder if that was all part of the plan to provoke Russia, and that's why no one told Zelensky to shut up about Ukraine getting nukes. You would think a seasoned and experienced diplomat in Munich, a collective West diplomat, would have said, maybe we should tell Zelensky to cool it down with this whole nuclear talk, because it's provoking the Russians, and the Russians are very close to invading Ukraine, and we need to cool things down instead of to ramp things up. But that's not what happened. Instead, what we got were collective West officials telling Zelensky to go out there and talk about nuclear weapons. Anyway, that was the Munich Security Conference last year. We now have the Munich Security Conference this year, and the Biden White House is going to reinforce failures, and they are going to reinforce their failure, and they are going to send Kamala Harris once again to Munich. And she put out a tweet, and she said, 1 year ago, I traveled to Munich on the eve of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and told President Zelensky and European allies and partners that the United States stands firmly with Ukraine. I return to Munich tomorrow and will make clear our commitment to Ukraine endorse. And there's a photo of Kamala with Zelensky in Munich. They both are wearing their masks. Zelensky is wearing a suit. So this is, actually we should call him Zelensky, because this photo was before Zelensky banned the letter Z. So in this photo, he still went by the name Zelensky, and he was actually dressed properly in a suit and tie. And this is before they decided to give Zelensky his new outfit of camouflage military attire and green sweatshirts. So that was Kamala with Zelensky 1 year ago. And now we're going to have Kamala Harris with, I imagine Zelensky's going to be there, or he'll definitely be there via video, but we're going to have Kamala in Munich along with Ursula von der Leyen. Back then she was von der Leyen and not Van der Crazy. But she will also be there, as will Olaf Scholz. They'll all be there with an Zelensky in person or an Zelensky via video. And I wonder what crazy stuff they are going to say this time around in Munich. Last time they were talking Ukraine and nukes. What are they going to talk about this time around in Munich? Supporting Zelensky for as long as it takes? Yeah. How Ukraine is going to win the war and is winning the war? Absolutely, they're going to talk about that as well. Mark Milley is saying that Ukraine is going to win the war. Actually, to be fair, Mark Milley said that there's a military stalemate and that the conflict is not going to be resolved with a military winner. That is what Milley said. It will be almost impossible for the Russians to achieve their political objectives by military means, Milley claimed, without providing specific reasons for his stance. He said, it is unlikely that Russia is going to overrun Ukraine. It's just not going to happen. He added that it also would be very, very difficult for Ukraine this year to kick the Russians out of every inch of the territory that Moscow's forces have already captured. Those are the statements from Mark Milley. It's going to be hard to kick out Russians this year, is what Milley is saying. Those are the statements from Milley. Of course, Milley was the guy that was in charge of all of Afghanistan, wasn't he? I mean, he is the top military official in the United States. So I don't know exactly how reliable Milley's statements are. I'm not even sure what kind of information he gets at this point, because we're getting some nutty statements from Collective West military officials and defense ministers. Ben Wallace, for example, he is saying that 97% of the Russian army is estimated to be in Ukraine. 97%. He said that has come at a huge cost to the Russian army. We now estimate 97% of the Russian army, the whole Russian army, is in Ukraine, Wallace said. If 97% of the Russian army is now committed to Ukraine, with an attrition rate very, very high, and potentially their combat effectiveness depleted by 40%, and nearly 2/3 of their tanks destroyed or broken, that has a direct impact on the security of Europe, he declared. I think what Russia is doing in trying to advance is doing in a sort of human way, almost First World War levels of attrition, and with success rates of a matter of meters rather than kilometers, Wallace pointed out. I'm just starting to wonder, what kind of information are all of these officials getting? Are they deliberately lying and they're all telling different lies? Blinken is saying that Crimea is off the table. That's going to be a red line. Nuland is saying that Ukraine is going to get Crimea soon and will have regime change in Russia. That's the ultimate goal. You have Milley saying that this is effectively a stalemate and that Russia won't be able to achieve their political aims by military means, and that in this year, Ukraine will not be able to kick out Russia out of territory. That's what Milley says. And then we have Ben Wallace talking about 97% of the Russian forces committed in Ukraine and 40% of the Russian forces depleted. If that is the case, then I don't understand why NATO just doesn't launch an all-out invasion of Russia. I mean, if you have 97% of Russian forces in Ukraine and 40% of those Russian forces are depleted, why not go for it? I mean, that's what Nuland wants. Why not just go for it? I mean, you only have 3% of the Russian military to contend with in the rest of Russia. Why not just go through Finland and the Baltics and Poland and just go straight through? All the Russian forces are down in Ukraine, according to Wallace. I'm questioning if they're lying and they've all lost the script because they're all telling different lies, it seems. Everyone is in their own little direction. I wonder if they're just getting bad information, if they're trying to deliberately deceive the public, if they're getting bad info from their militaries. I mean, is Wallace getting bad info from the UK intel? They're deliberately misleading Wallace, and he actually believes it. Are they getting their information from Ukraine military sources? That's a possibility. Perhaps the Ukraine Ministry of Defense is giving Wallace all of this information and he's actually believing it. That's what happened in 2014. The entire Collective West in 2014, they were getting all of their information from the Ukraine military, and they were buying into that information and they weren't getting an accurate picture. I don't know. Just everyone is in a different direction. They're all saying ridiculous nonsense stuff. And then you have the media reports about no ammo, no troops, stockpiles depleted. But look at the actions. At the end of the day, look at the actions. That's what counts. And the actions tell me one thing. They're not willing to give up their tanks. They're not willing to give up their F-16s. They're not willing to give up their ATACMS, their long-range missiles. And the reason they're not willing to give that up is because they know they're losing. And they know that whatever they throw into Ukraine, the Russians will defeat it. So I'm just going to look at their actions and not look at all of their statements, which are just getting crazier and crazier by the day. Anyway, I've rambled on enough in this video. Let's do a clown world. And this clown world is connected to the EU sanctions, as I said earlier in the video. And let me read you a title from the EU Observer. And the EU Observer, they're running a headline: EU to ban sales of toilets to Russia on war anniversary. The EU is to ban the sale of toilet bowls to Russia on the occasion of the SMO anniversary. According to the EU Observer, the main direction of the trade embargo, worth 11 billion euros per year, is the cessation of sales of high-tech goods that can be used in Russian weapon systems, electronic, lasers, radio equipment, avionics, and software. Also on the list are toilets and other plumbing fixtures, riot control water cannons, and electric discharge weapons. Toilets. They're going to sanction toilets and porta potties and toilet fixtures and bathroom fixtures and equipment, bathroom equipment and toilet equipment and toilets infrastructure and whatever else. This is where the EU has, this is the levels that the EU has reached to ban toilets to Russia. Oh boy. So let me know in the comments down below. Let me give me some very funny comments as to what these sanctions mean for Europe. The fact that they're going to be sanctioning toilets to Russia. The EU is really, they are really in the crapper. Boy, the EU is really getting into, the EU is really up S Creek with these sanctions. What else? The EU is really, they're really getting really into, they're really digging themselves into the toilet with these sanctions. Oh man, I don't know. Anyway, that is the video, everybody. I'm trying to think of some clever statements to describe the sanctions on toilets. Anyway, I'll leave it there. theduran.locals.com. We are also on Rockfin. Look for us on Telegram, Rumble, BitChute, and ODYSEE. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code. Good day. Take care.